Before the world mocked his breakdowns, before clips of his arrests became viral memes, and long before the paper bag stunt that left reporters speechless, Shia LaBeouf said something that in hindsight explained everything. In an early interview, spoken almost as a joke, he confessed that he sometimes felt like he was disappearing. Not creatively, not professionally, personally. It sounded philosophical back then, but it would become the central truth of his life. This is not the story of another celebrity scandal. It is the emotional anatomy of a prodigy who rose too fast, too young, and too broken to withstand the force of global fame. It is the story of a boy who learned to perform long before he learned to live, a young man who mined emotional trauma for authenticity, and an artist whose identity slowly dissolved beneath the characters he portrayed. Hollywood celebrated his brilliance, but it never asked what it cost him. And by the time it did, the damage was already carved into him. The making of a performer. Shia LaBeouf's childhood was never ordinary. Raised in a cramped Echo Park apartment by two parents he loved deeply but could never fully rely on, Shia's earliest memories were laced with tension and survival. His father, a Vietnam veteran wrestling with addiction, slipped in and out of Shia's life with unpredictable intensity. His mother, a warm but overwhelmed artist, struggled to hold their fragile world together. Shia didn't perform for applause. He performed to defuse danger. Comedy became a shield. Storytelling became currency. And acting, even before he knew the word, became survival. When he auditioned for Disney's Even Stevens, he wasn't a child actor seeking stardom. He was a child who had learned to weaponize performance, turning pain into talent with unnerving ease. Disney didn't discover him. He walked in already formed by a much harsher teacher, life. He could improvise like a seasoned comedian. He could shift from humor to vulnerability with the precision of an adult who'd spent years navigating unstable terrain. Producers didn't know the curse hiding behind the gift. They just wanted him on the show. Hollywood rarely asks where talent comes from. It only asks whether you can do it again. A star too brilliant for his own good. The transition from child star to dramatic actor is one of the most perilous journeys in Hollywood. But Shia made it look effortless. Disturbia revealed a performer with emotional range far beyond his years. Transformers catapulted him into superstardom, turning the once scrappy comedian into one of the world's most recognizable young actors. But with fame came claustrophobia. He went from being a promising actor to being a symbol, a franchise face, a brand, an economic asset whose image needed to stay profitable. Paparazzi trailed him relentlessly. Fans treated him like a commodity. Insiders described him as brilliant, intense, restless. But very few saw the truth. The more successful he became, the more his identity fragmented. Shia didn't separate from his roles. He dissolved into them. That's when the whispers began. Strange behavior on set, sudden emotional swings, an inability to stop rehearsing, nights spent pacing instead of resting. Co-stars described him as both magnetic and troubled. Directors praised the results but worried about the process. His performances were electric, but the cost was becoming visible. Every role demanded a piece of him he didn't know how to reclaim. The praise masked the pain. The intensity masked the instability. And Hollywood masked everything because as long as he delivered on screen, his personal unraveling was treated as method acting. But the line between art and identity was already gone. The collapse everyone saw but no one understood. By the time he reached his early 20s, the storm inside him had begun to break open. Lawless pushed him into dangerous depths he wasn't prepared to navigate. Nymphomaniac demanded emotional excavation that blurred reality and fiction. On set, Shia was committed to the point of obsession. Off set, he couldn't switch off the characters that consumed him. Public incidents followed. Arrests, fights, meltdowns caught on camera. Bizarre art performances that left audiences confused and journalists salivating. The most infamous moment came during his "I am not famous anymore" experiment, where he arrived at a film premiere wearing a paper bag with those words. scrawled across it. People laughed. They mocked him. They treated it like a stunt. But it wasn't a stunt. It was a message. He was telling the world he no longer recognized himself. The culmination of this collapse came in the form of leaked police footage during a 2017 arrest. Shia ranted about pain, privilege, abandonment. But beneath the chaos was a quiet sentence almost no one noticed. "You don't know what I've been through." For the first time, he wasn't hiding. He was confessing. And that confession opened the door to the truth. The wounds beneath the talent. In rehab, Shia finally began to reveal what had haunted him all along. He spoke about childhood trauma he had never processed. About growing up as the emotional anchor of a collapsing household. About shouldering financial responsibility as a child. About the fear, instability, and confusion that defined his earliest years. Acting wasn't a career. It was a coping mechanism. And the world mistook his coping for genius. He described acting as emotional possession, saying he had spent so many years merging with characters that he no longer knew who he was without them. He admitted that fame intensified the void, not filled it. He confessed that many of his performances weren't performances at all. They were expressions of unresolved pain spilling into the open. The most haunting revelation came from a letter he wrote during treatment. "When I'm not acting, I feel like I'm standing in an empty room with no doors." That single sentence reframed everything. Every meltdown, every strange interview, every self-destructive moment, every scandal. He wasn't trying to rebel. He was trying to escape a lifelong feeling of emptiness. He wasn't spiraling for tension. He was spiraling because he didn't know how to stop disappearing. The industry that burned him. Hollywood knew he was troubled, but it didn't intervene. Not really. It exploited his intensity, rewarded his breakdowns, and turned his emotional fractures into marketable drama. It admired the authenticity of his performances without questioning the source of that authenticity. It applauded his raw emotional access without acknowledging that rawness was coming from real, unresolved wounds. To the industry, a brilliant actor in pain is still a profitable actor. And so Shia was pushed, praised, marketed, and monetized until he cracked open in front of the entire world. Was he responsible for his actions? Yes. Should he be held accountable? Absolutely. But accountability and empathy can coexist. Because Shia LaBeouf didn't collapse because he was weak. He collapsed because he was never given the tools to survive the life he was thrust into. He never learned how to be Shia. He only learned how to perform. Where his story stands today. What remains now is not the storm, but the quiet after it. In recent years, Shia stepped away from fame, away from the noise, away from the industry that broke him and the spotlight that distorted him. His journey toward recovery is ongoing, complicated, unfinished. There are no guarantees, no neat ending, no redemption arc neatly tied with a bow. What Shia seeks now is not another blockbuster or another headline. He seeks identity. He seeks stability. He seeks the version of himself that got lost somewhere between childhood trauma and Hollywood expectation. Whether he finds it is a chapter only he can write. But one thing remains certain. Shia LaBeouf's life is not a cautionary tale about fame. It is a haunting reminder of how fragile identity becomes when the world mistakes your survival mechanisms for talent. Not every breakdown is a spectacle. Sometimes it is a person trying desperately to find a door out of an empty room. Some stories aren't about triumph. Some aren't about tragedy. Some are simply about truth. And this is his. Some stories are never revealed. But now you know.